And we are recording.
Okay.
All right, here's some attendees jumping in. All right, so quick thing, as I'm going down the attendees, I'm selecting them to allow to talk. Do we want video on for everybody as well? Video as well? Okay.
Yep.
Sure.
Yes,
Yeah.
please. Mm-hmm.
All right.
Seeing more familiar names come in, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Patrick, hey, Elizabeth, Perry, Mark, Eric.
Hi.
Hey, Perry. Good to see you. Hi, Mark. Eric.
Hello.
Hello.
Welcome.
Just going to wait a couple more minutes here. Looks like we've got a good group already joining.
You know, do we all need proper Zoom etiquette? Like, water.
Yes, proper Zoom etiquette is put yourself on mute until you want to speak up.
Can we give it one more minute here, then we'll start.
Yep. And before I transfer the host permissions to you, Paul, if you see anyone else pop up as an attendee, all you have to do is just select them, and you'll have the option to promote them to a panelist. So it's pretty easy.
Okay, great.
Yep. In fact, I'll go ahead, Paul, and transfer the host to you. All right.
Sounds good.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank everyone here for joining our executive roundtable today. To start things off today, I would like to introduce our panelists. We have a couple of panelists that we're going to be leveraging to run some questions by and get their thoughts. We also have put some a survey in market that came back. It was in market for about a week and came back last week. So this is really fresh data. And we're going to ask Doug Cogswell to kind of do some high-level review of the findings that we had. So we've got some conversation starters to get into here. But let me start by introducing our panelists. First, Adrienne Owen is the Assistant Vice President of Advancement Services at LSU Foundation. She is leading the Analytics, Information Services, and Donor Relations, Records and Data Management, Gifts Processing, and Prospect Development team. So
Wow.
quite a wide group of individuals that she's overseeing. So she's been at LSU since 2013 and has held several other positions at LSU. So we welcome you, Adrienne, and thank you so much for joining. Also, we have Amanda Trabeau, and Amanda is from Western Kentucky University. She's a two-time alumna, and she came back to WKU in 2019 as the VP of Philanthropy and Alumni Engagement. And she began her career way back in college as a phone-a-thon caller. So she has a wide range of experience as well. Has also worked at Washington U in St. Louis and Vanderbilt, and is a Case 3 board member. And then finally, I'm not sure if Rick Darnell from the University of Illinois is going to join us or not. He had some potential conflicts, but Rick, if he joins, is our Senior VP at for Campaigns and Communications and Marketing and Donor Services at the University of Illinois Foundation. He's been in his role there since 2016 and had several other roles there as well. I'm going to also allow our staff to introduce themselves real quickly, and then we can go around and introduce everybody else. I'm going to open up the mics for everybody. I'm Paul Belat, Senior Vice President of Technology Sales at Pursuant. And then I'll let our staff start and go around there.
Yeah, I'm Doug Cogswell. I'm the founder of Advisor and currently EVP of Strategy for Pursuant.
Thanks, Doug.
And I'm Kim Cogswell. I'm Director of Technology Solutions. I work very closely with Paul, who is my new boss, now that Doug isn't.
Kristen Priest, I'm Vice President of Client Services at Pursuant, with emphasis in major gifts and campaigns.
Thanks. And I think that is the extent of our team. Maybe we can go around with the participants. Maybe we can start with Elizabeth, because I'm sure the screen is like a Brady Bunch screen for everybody.
Mm.
I'm Elizabeth Donaldson. I am the Director of Prospect Development and Analysis at the University of Richmond.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Perry, maybe you can go next.
Sure. I'm Perry Molds. I'm Vice President for Development and External Relations at Belmont University in Nashville.
Great. Thanks, Perry. Let's see here. Let's see, make sure Mark's unmuted here. Mark?
Yes, I'm Mark Helmuth, Chief Advancement Officer for the Ball State University Foundation.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Eric, can you go next?
Sure. Hi, Eric Barrett. I'm Chief Development Officer for the University of Michigan, Michigan Medicine, which is the health system and medical school at the University of Michigan.
Fantastic. And I think that is all the participants that we have right now. Doug, I'm going to turn it over to you and let you kind of do some review on the survey results.
Great. Yeah, let me just share my screen. And you will all get a more detailed version of this. So I'm just going to run through what we learned by surveying the market. Let me see if I can hide this as well. So we sent a survey out to about 9,500 higher ed fundraising stakeholders and received 100 and something responses back, which was about a 1.2% response rate, which is pretty good. High level, the type and size of school is shaping the impact of COVID. There's a variety of scenarios going on. Some of the top tier schools are not that impacted. Some have classes coming back in the fall, some don't. Some have big athletic programs that are dropping a lot of revenue, some don't. So the impact is not consistent. It varies quite a bit. Donor and alumni expectations around reopening the college or the university with students is creating uncertainty for fundraising. You'll see some more detail on that in a minute. But clearly not having students on campus doesn't, for a lot of the donors, sit as well as having them back. Fundraising is deemed critical across the board, but capital campaigns are getting paused or delayed in many cases. And events are getting canceled or become virtual. So some of the normal things that you would do are harder to do. There's hiring freezes and professional development cuts, but there's investments in virtual strategies that are accelerating. So it's sort of a bifurcation here where some things are cut back, other things are being invested in. The general sense that guidance is needed on how to transition field officers from virtual donor engagement in solicitation techniques versus visits and the traditional things they've done. I mean, you can't say, hey, I'm coming to Atlanta next week. I'd like to meet with, have lunch with you while I'm in town. That doesn't work. And so it's both how to measure that and also how to coach the team and how to use online, phone, email in ways that are maybe more progressive than in the past. High level, I'm going to then step through some of the detail. So sports has a varying impact. Half the survey said neutral, 19% significantly to the negative. And we know we have some clients who are D1 schools who are losing $60 to $100 million a year revenue if sports don't come back. So there's some significant impact here on this side, but in others, it's not really a factor. So that varies a lot. We asked about pressure from donors and alumni to reopen, and it's what its impact would be. Almost half said it's going to have an impact. 12% said no, and the other roughly half said unsure. There's a bunch of factors why, but clearly the purpose of a university or college and a lot of the investment goes into buildings, centers, labs, And if people aren't on campus, it raises questions about whether a campaign to build the next, the new liberal arts facility makes sense or not. So clearly a connection between students on campus versus not. We also know that some of the systems in some of the schools have canceled classes at least into the beginning of 2021. The Cal State system is one that jumps to mind. Whereas others have stated they're going to kick off classes. Notre Dame made an announcement in August and try to finish them before Thanksgiving, but they're going to have students on campus. We also know that some are going hybrid. Harvard Business School is having on campus starting in the fall, but they have a lot of international students, so it's going to be a hybrid on campus, online, or deferrals. So the impact here also varies, but it can be significant. What investments are being paused or stopped? Hiring freezes, layoffs, strategic shifts in launch dates, CRM upgrades, fundraising technologies paused and stopped, held, travel, hospitality. So it's a bunch of things that are being paused or stopped. Some hiring freezes, some layoffs, not that many layoffs, but some. What are you accelerating? Financial aid, student emergency funds, a bunch of strategic shifts in technology, mostly to online, and all the technologies that go with that. So again, there's a variety of things happening here that are, as I said before, somewhat bifurcated into two camps. One of the questions that, and we've been doing a lot of research and just posted something out on the APRA listserv yesterday, how are you measuring meaningful conversations? Because since you can't make visits, what are you actually measuring? What constitutes a connection with a prospect to move them forward? Most are tracking emails, Zoom calls as activity recorded in the CRM, which is kind of use the visit. I mean, so people, some places are putting the non-visits in as visits, so they get flagged as a higher level. A good number are only measuring substantive activity that moves the prospect close to a solicitation. How are they doing that? Some have prospect research mining the contact reports to read out what's meaningful. We're pushing technologies that can automatically parse them. Some have the field officers flagging an interaction as meaningful or significant or not. So there's a variety of things going on, and this is, I think, a hot topic that everybody's wrestling with right now. So that leads to topics of interest today: major gift fundraising, how to set goals, how to handle discovery visits with new prospects, adapting to lack of in-person events, segmentation, how to adapt to donors and alumni who are experiencing COVID differently. There's a variety of perspectives. So this is some of the feedback for what the survey wanted more input on. Best innovative practices, what's working well, virtual fundraising and planning, storytelling, cause support, changes with no students on campus, how to plan for next year, when are staff coming back. So last slide here, and I'll turn it back to you, Paul. This is sort of the topics of interest that the survey said they would like to do more with. So back to you, and that's the survey, and you'll get the long version after this is over.
Great. Thanks, Doug. That's awesome. So one of the things that we wanted to do to kind of kick off the conversations here is I have our panelists start with a few questions. That last slide was indicating where there was some additional interest in drill down. So maybe I can start with Amanda. And one of the questions I would have for you, Amanda, is in the wake of not being able to have the face-to-face meetings with major donors, what metrics are you kind of tracking today to deem something a meaningful conversation or something that is moving the ball down the court, so to speak?
Very much like the survey pointed out, we've struggled a bit with how to do this and do it in a way that is giving a little bit of more leniency to the team and understanding what they're doing, but also making sure that it's moving a conversation forward. We have indicated a virtual visit in our CRM as an option to select so that we can track how much of that is occurring. Substantive contact to us is having a two-way interaction. So just simply putting out the email request or requesting a phone call, not looking at that request for activity, but what's the actual activity that is taking place. We have our prospect management liaison really working closely with each of the gift officers to have conversations about, okay, who did you talk to in the last week, month, that sort of thing, so we can get a better understanding. And we've sort of set out for us 90-day plans. And so our summer schedule at the institution, which also aligns with the restart plan for our campus, of course, which is very heavily focused on students and academics and athletics and all of those things. But we as a division decided to do our own 90-day plan. And so we took our metrics and scaled those to our team based on that 90 days. So May 15 through basically the August 15 timeline.
That's great. And everyone's got the ability to unmute yourself. So we'd love to have this as a comprehensive discussion with everyone participating. So love to hear if any other individuals are kind of having that same kind of challenge and what they may be doing to address it.
I will say that we are reevaluating our metrics comprehensively. This coincides with a really strategic shift that COVID accelerated. It was already happening, a shift towards scholarships and really realigning our priorities with budget really for the university. So COVID has really ramped that up, and we are very much focusing on like cash dollars raised and tracking that as a new metric. And we're really becoming more lenient with how we track visits. We're allowing face-to-faces to count if they happen over Zoom. So if you're face-to-face, it doesn't matter what mechanism you're doing that. Those are counting as visits, which is new for us, but we're really ramping up the expectation for that. So, saying you should be having 4 visits on every prospect in your portfolio a year. So that's really ballooned the number that we're expecting of our fundraisers. But that aligns with actually presentations I've seen Doug and Kim do on the number of moves necessary to close a gift. So we're seeing big, higher dollar goals, but focused on cash, higher visit numbers, but allowing some leeway in how those are tracked and things like that.
Adrian, I'm curious, are you seeing a difference in the acceptance of Zoom based on the length of tenure in someone's role? Are the older folks not as willing to kind of get on Zoom, or is there a difference there?
Yeah, so actually I've been surprised. Everybody's embraced it pretty well because, we've for better or worse, first of all, we had some layoffs and I think that makes people very willing to accept change, quite candidly. But I also will say that we have really hungry people on the front line and they want to hit their metrics. I mean, a good fundraiser wants to hit their goals. And so I think regardless of age or background, people have been very willing to embrace it. We had somebody the first week make a $1.5 million ask over Zoom. And I think that kind of proved the efficacy that it was possible. Once that story got around, it was like, well, I'm gonna hop on and see what I can do on Zoom. So I'd say our team has really embraced it across the board, for better or worse, because they had to.
That's great. How about anybody else that's been listening in? A similar kind of experience?
Yeah, I'll chime in. At Ball State, it's been I've been pleasantly surprised. I'll just leave it at that. We have not adjusted our metrics. We've had some conversations early about it this year, but only 2 of our staff members right now are in jeopardy of not hitting their metrics, and they're going to be very close to it. So we are counting Zooms as face-to-face, and had an interesting conversation last week with the president and some of my senior leadership. And we were kind of joking, but if you can imagine, pre-COVID, 4 or 5 months ago, if any of us had suggested reaching out to any of our top donors or prospects via Zoom, if we knew what Zoom was at the time, we probably would have been laughed off the street. And now we've got people that are actually wanting to do it. So to give you an example, we have a president who is just fantastic with donors. He loves to spend time with them. And he and his wife have started hosting virtual cocktail hours with selected donors and prospects. So we've got some people that are very creative on the front end, purchased some branded glassware, beer mug and champagne flutes and that kind of stuff, and send them to the people in advance, and then they have their call and their conversation. The president talked to me last week. He said, I love it because right now it gives my wife and I a chance to have dinner by ourselves, and we're not necessarily going someplace. And he said, I can get to see people whenever it's convenient for us. We don't have to try to coordinate with a trip and everything else. So I really think this is going to be one of those results from a change that's really going to change our business going forward. We're not going to get rid of the personal visit, but God, how many times have we called somebody to say, I want to come see you, I'm going to be out there next week. I'm not going to be there then. That's gone now. That's gone now. So I'm pretty darn excited about it, if you can't tell. So we're happy. We've not paused our capital campaign. Thankfully we're in the planning phase. So moving right ahead with that and feeling pretty darn good. So
That's great.
That's great, Mark.
I mean, my comments are pretty similar at Michigan. We have, in medicine, we have about 50 gift officers across our system, but we have about 200 total, including the 50 at the university. I'd say the university has probably been a little bit behind in terms of visits, and then medicine. I mean, clearly the COVID pandemic, in some ways, in a weird way, worked in our favor. We've received about over 10,000 gifts in the last 2.5 months to our health system. 4,000 of those have been new gifts. We've done a lot of webinars. As you can imagine, there's an appetite for information about COVID and other health issues. We're starting to do some TED Talks, about 8 to 10 minute. We've been filming them. We're kind of the luxury of having a video crew. So we've been doing a lot of those. We've, as Mark mentioned, I think that old saying is, don't let a good crisis go to waste. I think we've engaged with people in different ways than we thought we never would. Our president has also hosted a series of Zoom meetings with groups of up to about 25 major donors and some smaller groups as well. We've had a lot of advisory board meetings, different, again, seminars, webinars, almost by every department across the university and medicine. So I think we've had some seminars where we've had 500 people log in. We can send them out to 50,000 people. Our license goes up to, I think, over 10,000 participants can be on a call. So I think, is it a perfect system? Like Mark says, no. I think we haven't really adjusted our metrics either, although we've probably had some complaints from people who, may not, had a harder time adjusting and getting used to it. I think when the pandemic first happened, I think we were all hopeful that we'd be at home for 2 or 3 weeks versus 2 or 3 months. So today time will tell, but I don't think we're going back in person anytime soon. Although I did do a face-to-face visit with a donor with a face mask on last week to pick up a $30 million gift agreement. So I think for special occasions we're doing it, but we still have a ban on travel, by plane travel, and we're being discouraged to be meeting with donors and face-to-face unless it's a really special occasion.
Yeah, thanks. Anybody else have any thoughts there?
Good news.
I got a sense that Eric would suit up no matter what to go get that 30 million.
I think I would, for 30 million, I guess it was, he brought his daughter and his grandson. And it was interesting though, because, his office is basically closed and his assistant was there, but he brought his daughter and his grandson in for the signing, and we took a photo op with our masks on. So, it was, and, Michigan is a pretty high state, as we all know. We've had, I think, 5th in the country still with deaths and really high prevalence of COVID cases and a lot of really sick comorbidities and so forth, sick people. So we've, our family's been really cautious, on making sure we don't, give it to anybody or get exposed. But so that was my first visit though, for sure, in the last 2.5 months, at least without Zoom.
So Eric, quick question. Was that a gift that was basically on track? Obviously 30 million, you had been working with that particular donor. Did it accelerate in any way?
It'll be announced on Monday, I believe, is what started off the gift, their first gift to diabetes, pretty significant gift, multi-million-dollar gift. And then we had been working on it literally for a couple of years. And like a lot of things with the pandemic, it got stalled a little bit. We were literally supposed to sign it about the day that we were asked to shelter in place. And then we made some revisions back and forth on the payment terms and so forth that the president had to approve. So we kind of knew it was going to happen. We just didn't know exactly when. And then there were some other external factors that why we're going to announce it this week. And part of it just to get some good news. We all just share, markets melting down 1,500 points today. There's, social justice issues going on. There's, the pandemic's been bad in Michigan. So I think, we kind of convinced the donor and his family that it would be nice to actually see some positive news. We've actually, like I said, not to sound like, being pompous or anything, but medicine specifically, we've been significantly up this year. We're up about 45% over our revenue this year versus last year. So that's not the case though at the university. We're down across the university.
Rick, thanks for joining. I appreciate it. I know your time was tight today. I wanted to throw a question at you with respect to the communications and crisis communication, since you're over marketing and communications at the University of Illinois Foundation. As COVID has hit, and even now with the kind of social injustice that has been happening here and all that in the news in the last couple of weeks, how are you dealing with that with respect to your cause for support and how you're messaging out to your donors?
That's a dynamic question. Thanks for having me, Paul. First and foremost, I'm going to handle it in two ways. I don't think we're any different than anybody else, but when COVID happened, we did the juggling act that all of y'all did. And that was, hey, how many events are planned? How many communications are in the pipeline? And we need to get control of it. And so we had over 208 that were in the pipeline that we immediately needed to put the brakes on. And some of those happened faster than others. We work with 3 universities. And ironically, no different, but the lesson learned out of that is quicker you get to upper leadership, the better, because a lot of our colleges and folks felt like their message was still very, very important. And, for us to all be consistent, you really needed that decision from the top to kind of put the brakes on everything. We made an internal decision when we did that good, bad, and indifferent, but we recognized how broad our state is and the impact being Chicago all the way down to Cairo, Illinois, totally a variety of issues there. We made an internal decision. Not only are we going to slow down on our communication and let it only come from the chancellors and leadership, but in addition to that, we chose not to do any asks, go in a welfare mode like most people up until May 1 and reassess it. So that is purely from the COVID standpoint. We have to flip on the other aspect of where we are today from the variety of issues that are out there. We have truly taken a step back at the foundation on purpose and let our universities lead. They're in 3 different locations, and we felt like that is definitely the voice of the chancellors who lead our universities first and foremost. And believe it or not, we even had to kind of coach our assistant president, let the universities lead on this one. I had to internally do that, but we just felt like being more specific to where the area is and being more sensitive, especially in Chicago, because at the same time, outside our campus is a very challenging low-income area that's dealing with a lot of issues, and protests were scheduled to be in that part of the city as well as across the river. We also had a hospital that's serving people in a great need. And I really commend our leadership. I think they did a phenomenal job of trying to reinforce the power of our rights as Americans to protest, but not become political. And if you haven't figured out, Illinois is very political. And so, it is obviously a huge urban area that dominates our population, but there's a great deal of the state that's, there's a lot of the people that are Democratic, but there's also a lot of people Republican. And I really commend our board chair as well as this. So I'll share with you what we did communicate. Due to the tensions and things like that, we actually got some gifts. Obviously, we positioned like everybody in May, student funding and gifts for support for science or health or medicine. But our board chair stepped up and had recently just done a big gift for us that we announced, a $10 million gift just 2 months ago. That was very, very important for research for us for the future, for the system. But he and his wife stepped up for a gift to help our staff, people at the hospital, anybody that got sick. And unfortunately, we've had a couple deaths of staff members. And I think by those kind of being timely of reinforcing, hey, we're here for you, we're here to serve, and really reinforcing what we offer was a better way to go than to get into trying to be in one angle or the other. And we did not try to, we encouraged that and we took a step back. The systems took a step back and let the universities lead. But all we did promote was giving to students, giving to healthcare, and then lastly, trying to show some examples of where some great gifts or great impacts happening, and that's it. And just to share with you, we are still kind of going in that same mode through the summer. You know, we're far out of this. We're really trying to position our hospital to let them do what they do and do well. And, you know, hopefully everything else will fall in line. Hopefully that answers it.
Yeah, that's a great answer. And I'm just curious for some of the other folks that maybe aren't in such an expansive geography like the U of I or Michigan with so many different campuses. What were your kind of responses in a similar question there?
We have, while a smaller community, Richmond, Virginia has a street that runs right through it. It's called Monument Avenue, and there are a lot of Confederate monuments. So this has been quite real for us and very close to home. Can y'all hear me? I feel like I'm freezing up.
Yeah, we can hear you fine, Elizabeth.
Sorry, I think I'm having a little spotty internet this morning. But anyway, we, I think in some ways, while we've been very much at the forefront of this topic, it's very dear to our president, Thriving Inclusive Community, and we actually have a fund for it. We've been surprised. I don't think been quick enough to respond. So we're trying to still work on a good response out for that particular topic. It's something very important that we need to reach out to our alumni community specifically. And we hope to, because we have a fund for it, we have people who've been wanting to give money for that cause. We're going to lean into that in the next few months, particularly with that in mind from our development office anyway.
Yeah, thanks.
I can speak a little bit to Belmont. We are in a situation where, of course, Nashville is a growing city. We have about 8,500 students at the university, but about 80% of them come from out of state. And about 50% of our alumni live in Middle Tennessee. So we've got an interesting mix when we take into account our parent prospects. We've grown very rapidly over the past 20 years. So our alumni prospects are by and large not as wealthy as a lot of our parent prospects are. Prior to those 20 years, you know, our earliest stages, we taught, as we say, teachers and preachers. And now we have a lot more healthcare, business, music business folks who are doing well. But all of that to say, we also have a president who remains very focused on endowment building and on some very large-scale capital projects on campus. We have not paused our capital projects either, and we're going into the final year of a comprehensive campaign. I can't tell you whether or not it's still going to be the final year. That has changed things a little bit. But because our president wanted to remain focused on endowment building and capital projects, and because of kind of the nature of the makeup of our student body, we did not shift to a current dollars fundraising model. And with that in mind, we kind of stepped back on solicitations as well. And we've spent the last 2 months in some of the heaviest telephone and Zoom, just general outreach engagement that we have done in the 6 years that I've been here. And one of the reports that I receive every Monday morning is the comprehensive report on all contact reports. We're small enough where we can still do that. And the length and depth of those contacts has significantly improved. So as I've talked to my president, when he asked, hey, are any checks coming in? I've had to say, honestly, not as many, but from the relationship building standpoint, we've been able to really capitalize on the situation.
What other kind of changes have you been making, Perry, with respect to your campaign then? Are there any other, wholesale changes that you're making there?
Well, Belmont is a ecumenical Christian university, so I've been praying a lot more than I kind of the standard.
Yeah.
You know, we're in a little bit of a wait and see mode. We were in a unique position when we announced the campaign. Part of the campaign process is having a match, an institutionally provided match for endowment gifts to endowment priorities. So endowed scholarships, endowed missions, endowed faculty support. And we're still moving forward with that, but it's revenue dependent. We're still a tuition dependent university. And so, you know, the pause has not been for scope. The conversations I've had with the president about, do we need to extend the campaign? We're in kind of wait and see mode. So we're telling our staff it's full steam ahead. We are starting to make more asks as people are more comfortable with the Zoom process. And as people start to know, yeah, you know, I'm not going to be laid off, or yeah, the market's stable enough. But in the next month to 2 months, we're going to have a lot of conversations about the marketing of the final year, because we're going to have to make the call. Yes, we call it the final year, or we don't.
Okay. Amanda, you had some challenge. You were starting to look at some micro campaigns, right? As part of what you were doing with your campaign. Is that right?
Yeah, we were supposed to have publicly launched April 17th. And so that was put on hold. And I think it's forced us to reassess kind of where we are, and thinking about, much to what Perry was talking about, we've been counting since 2012. And during that time, we had a presidential leadership change, and which prevented us from going public earlier. So we were even having dialogues this spring about, are we going to have kind of a 2-year quick public phase to kind of wrap up this, you know, best counting period that we've ever had in the institution's history. We've had a big focus on student scholarship support, and this was an effort that was created by our president and the first lady during his investiture 3 years ago. So now, given the situation that we're in and the need for student support, we've really been considering over the last couple of weeks of focusing on maybe a micro campaign effort for bolstering that student scholarship fund program, really pushing that goal out, and focusing on it, and softly selling whatever that number ends up being of the largest, you know, decade of fundraising for the institution.
Makes sense.
I'd like to jump in on what you're talking about, Amanda. You know, when I was talking about the strategic pivot, we started counting our campaign in 2016, fiscal year 16, and we went public last year. And, you know, it was really this spring, right before COVID started, that our board said, we're over halfway through campaign and we don't see the impact of these dollars on our campus. You know, while we're raising massive amounts of money, we're going to get to end of campaign and feel like we haven't actually made an impact, because it was raising money for professorships and chairs and so many things that are not like the strategic needs of the university, you know. And so, to your point, we've really started to shift towards scholarships, and now with everything happening with COVID, and then honestly, even you know, the kind of civil unrest happening right now, an even greater strategic shift towards underrepresented students. So really driving our scholarship dollars. And what's exciting is that I think it's going to ultimately result in an in-campaign that is a lot more impactful to the university as a whole. It's going to allow them to redirect dollars that they've been spending on tuition discounts to actually do things like deferred maintenance and capital and things like that. It's allowing us to raise money for inspirational things that have stories. The money's actually being spent effectively in an impactful way. So this has been a weird blessing in disguise. I mean, we're nervous about hitting that campaign goal, you know, in 2024 is when we're supposed to wrap up. And we're also talking about, do we extend that? But, you know, I think we've all kind of welcomed the challenge of this, because it's allowed us to really reevaluate those priorities and make sure we're driving dollars in a meaningful way.
Well, and Adrian and Amanda, that's something that we're seeing with a wide variety of, especially universities that are in various stages of a campaign, is in some way restructuring the goals and priorities within that. And then they're doing two things. One is kind of leading into and then immediately following the close of the summer fiscal year, say, okay, budgetarily, what does it look like? Where are our crisis or emergency kind of funding priorities? And then secondarily, in light of what's happening around us and in light of how this will continue, and then even going into presidential elections, how do we repackage, if you will? Where is there opportunity where 6 months, a year ago, this wouldn't have seemed like something really exciting that donors would want to wrap their arms around? And now, to your point, Adrian, we're seeing opportunity within this that both line up against unexpected budget needs and heightened relevance that we case.
Adrian, as you think about segmentation of your donors and prospective donors, there's a lot of different ways that COVID has affected the population, right? And are you doing anything to try to understand how COVID is affecting different sectors of your donor database or prospect donor database?
Yeah, this is a fun question. So we actually removed almost $160 million out of our pipeline when the price per barrel of oil tanked, because we are not diversified in our prospect pool in terms of the maturity. When we started really ramping up for campaign in 2015, that was when I was in prospect management, and I saw that lack of diversity, and we started really trying to ramp up cultivating, tech, agriculture, things like that were in our alumni base, but underrepresented in terms of donors. So that was scary. Helen Brown put out this fantastic piece recently that was titled "Who's Doing Well in COVID?" And it was really insightful in terms of what sectors are really benefiting, for the way Eric put it, for better or worse, and those who are not. And we've been looking at that. But we've had some really big gifts stalled out, but we have also, on the flip side of that, seen greater engagement than ever. So, I think we feel confident that as the market rebounds, fingers crossed, that we'll start to see some of that come back into play. But yeah, oil and gas being hit was hard. Louisiana's heavy food service industry, some of our most notable alumni have robust restaurant chains and things like that. So that's taken a hit. Agriculture's taken a hit. So it's been interesting. Yeah.
Anybody else have kind of similar experiences? Some I know are more diverse kind of geographies than others, but.
I just got something I just wanted to add, having taken some good insight from this call, as well as a couple other recent calls I've had with other folks dealing with campaigns. I don't mean to sound trite, but we all know what gets measured gets done. On the flip side, we actually have been doing in the springtime for the last 4 to 5 years a branding survey to kind of help us as we're going through the campaigns to see what images and changes are happening at our universities and perceptions. And shockingly, 6 years ago, 4 years ago, we were seen as research and higher ed, and we serve students. And what really changed here, and we had already been doing it this year with positioning some of the services and economic impact, but caring came through very high. It was number 2 on our aspect this past year. Obviously, we didn't change much in it, but how our commercials and how our digital marketing was perceived in the messaging tied a lot more to health. People saw us as a caring community or caring organization. First time in 20 years that's ever been in the top 5. So just what you I guess just like what you measure gets done, what you message, when you guys were talking about earlier, you put out there, and obviously a talented group like this company, will be remembered. And I think that's been a real benefit to us to reinforce that lesson. I think on the other hand, another interesting one is the cost of education. Michigan and Illinois deal with this as large publics. We're perceived as expensive. Well, we froze our education costs for 6 years. And the reality is we last year showed as a value, and we've highlighted some of those points. As soon as we did not communicate any of that this year, that fell out of the top 5. So just very interesting that because we had promoted it, I think it was noticed. But as soon as we didn't, it was dropped. So big lessons learned there. As for the last thing I want to share with you guys that is interesting to hear this theme and more powerful. Over the last 2 months with the campaigns that I'm overseeing for the 3 universities, at public institutions, the scholarship numbers at a lot of places around the country are not being hit, those goals. Privates, they are, but publics, it's definitely a concern. There's a lot of great dollars being raised for it, but I think that that's just, if you are experiencing that, and there was only on a call that I was on yesterday, there were several publics and privates, there was only one institution that hit their scholarship goal during their overall 8-year to 10-year campaign. And
when you say scholarship goal, do you mean like a fundraising target, or do you mean income?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, fundraising target. And then how that institution actually achieved it was they brought in more of the need-based and started qualifying that in kind of what their original scholarship goal was. So they admitted that they changed their target, but I do think that we're all finding the boomers and the silent generation historically have given to that area, but it's not as strong as what it's been, and we have to articulate a better message. So, but interesting, and you guys just added more fuel to what I feel like we really have to focus hard on the students. I mean, we're doing one thing, but we've got to tell those stories and really show what the need is a lot better than what we do. And if you could, for me, when you speak, tell me where you're from. I apologize in this.
Rick, this is Eric from University of Michigan. We've had similar issues this year with scholarships. We had a $1 billion student support goal across the university during our Victors for Michigan campaign, but it did include need and merit-based scholarships, and there was also a caveat in that we included irrevocable plan gifts as part of hitting those scholarship goals. So. But we have seen a big drop off, which is interesting that you said this. We just saw the data yesterday by our campaign director on the scholarships, and maybe it's because we're not pushing it as much since we ended our campaign. But we actually, I think all of our institutions, whether you're private or public or big or small, we're seeing a huge need for financial aid this year because of the economy and things that have changed in our world since many students. I have a daughter going to school next year, and many of these campuses are going to be faced with huge costs to really reactivate the campus. And then on the flip side, they have a lot of financial aid needs that they have to commit to, that they've committed to students to meet their needs, but now their needs have gone up significantly, and many schools are re-looking at what those financial aid needs will be come fall, given if a parent lost their job or financial situation changed drastically over the last few months.
Yeah, I will echo that. And I'm from LSU, Rick. Go Tigers. I will say for us, focusing on need has been like the primary driving factor in us starting to see a ramp up in that. Louisiana's a poor state, and the majority of our students coming in have financial need. And so that message has really carried with our alumni, but I am curious to see how that will sustain over the long term. Like you were saying, if what you market is kind of what people gravitate towards, and I wonder if we're seeing a ramp up because that's what we're really focusing on, but I'm curious to hear from you all what has worked in terms of kind of shifting those priorities or thinking about fundraising for scholarships.
This is Elizabeth from University of Richmond. I will say it's given us an opportunity for education to our current donors and for prospects. We have a $2 billion, it was $2.5 billion, now it's $2 billion endowment. And there's a lot of misconception about, it being a rainy day fund. I'm sure some of you all deal with that as well. So this has been a great opportunity for some of our virtual meetings, especially with the president or our executive director for business and finance, to really provide some language and messaging around how we use that and need it. And it's a different type of platform for an ask. So, and different opportunities around those conversations.
Are any of you able to quantify in any way the impact or the uncertainty around whether or not students will actually be able to physically be on campus? Because, you know, you're talking about a lot about raising money for scholarships, but how is that impacted by the fact that students may be, you know, virtually attending classes?
I want to say, I'm curious to hear what everybody else says, but I love our president's answer on this, so I really want to share it. What he said is, even if students are not physically on campus, this is actually going to provide a more engaging opportunity for them, because lectures will be provided in advance, and they'll be able to digest that content. And then the plan is to have very Socratic dialogue and a much more engaging experience in the classroom. So whereas previously they might just be getting a lecture and taking notes, now in this new format, they actually anticipate it being a highly engaging environment, and they can actually drive down the student to teacher ratios because they can have more virtual classes. And so that's a compelling and interesting case that he's making. You know, I'm curious to see how it bears out, but you know, the cost of attendance, tuition is what it is, you know, and that's the biggest chunk of what it costs to attend. So we'll see, but I think he made a pretty compelling case on it.
I'm going to jump off in a few minutes, so I'll just go, and then I apologize. I look forward to having another one of these in the future, and really enjoyed hearing from all our colleagues across the country. We are planning what we're calling a public health informed campus fall. We have 45 or 46,000 students that live on campus, and 2 other campuses in Dearborn and Flint, Michigan, that are more commuter but do have some residential aspects to them. To Adrian's point, we're looking at hybrid type classes. Someone else mentioned, I think, too, where where we'll have some in person, probably larger sessions will be broken down into smaller sessions. Our dean of our school of public health, as well as my boss, the CEO of the health system, are leading a committee with the provost and the president. Our president's also an MD, PhD immunologist, so he's got a lot of background and interest in this area. But the hope is that we have some type of fall semester, for places like LSU, Illinois, these big campuses that have these traditions. I don't think we'll have 113,000 people in the big house this fall. I think we'll have 18 to 20,000 is what we're hearing. And my daughter's supposed to be a freshman at Michigan next fall. So we're, as a family, very interested in, getting the most normal campus experience that especially given the way her senior year was this past spring. But again, happy to answer any questions offline. I just want to say thanks to my colleagues and to Paul and others for pulling this together. It was a real delight. I have to give a presentation to our cabinet at 2, so I just want to make sure I have my Zoom up and right, so I'm not trying to fiddle with it right when I'm first to go. So I do appreciate it. Hope to see, maybe I'll see Rick if we ever get back to the Big Ten fundraising conference or something like that, and other colleagues at other national conferences or functions. So please do reach out on LinkedIn or wherever is convenient, on email. And I don't know, Paul, if you're going to share contact information with people, but that'd be great.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Thank you so much for participating, Eric.
All right, thank you all. I really appreciate your time.
Yep.
And
Thanks.
take care.
Well, we're kind of coming up to the top of the hour here. I wanted to, thank everyone for participating, but in closing, I wanted to make sure everyone knew that we were happy to share more depth about the survey results. We're likely going to do another one and see how COVID continues to kind of affect the university environment. So we're going to keep this thing going, I think, over a period of time here, so we can kind of weigh in and see how things are evolving. Are there any kind of closing thoughts as we kind of wrap this up today?
Hey, Paul, obviously I don't want to trump anything you're doing, but if it falls in there and you're open to any other survey questions,
Yeah.
It's been a hot topic. It was kind of blown off when I brought it up months ago, and now it's a hot topic, and it's our funding models and budgeting for the future. So this group that I'm a part of, about 20 universities, we are going to talk in July about, hey, what are the different levers that we use to fund our organizations? We all know what they are, but how are those changing? And more importantly, how is our donors, administration folks going to handle those? I think that would be a hot topic for the same group personally.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts on that? These are great. We'd love to get that feedback.
I'm also wondering if anyone has questions for each other or for the group, your own questions that you'd like to get answers to or get perspectives on.
This is less specific and more about time, but one of the things I'd love to have the opportunity to do is have a conversation similar to this in 1 or 2 months to see how is it going. All of these changes, all of these things that we're implementing, this thing is changing so rapidly. I have to wonder how many things are going to be permanent, how many things are we going to discard pretty quickly, and then what happens when the inevitable rise of cases hit our campuses. So just kind of continuation in and of itself is a good thing.
Yeah,
that's great.
Also, a question: the size of this group felt pretty good, where everyone was participating. Does that feel good to everybody in terms of the size? Probably no more than 10. Is that good? I see heads nodding. So
very manageable. Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. All right. Well, we will, like I said, disperse some of this research on the survey. We also recorded this today, so we will also share that if you want to kind of go back and listen to some of the commentary. We really appreciate everyone's participation and the panelists for stepping in and being able to field some of these questions to get the conversation started. Much appreciated. And we will be in contact soon. Enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank Paul.
Thank you all for this.
Nice to meet y'all.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you all.
Take care.